Руководитель программы «Искусство и бизнес» Института культуры Sotheby в Лондоне. Один из основателей и исполнительный директор Art Insight Limited. Образовательного партнера ведущей компании по исследованию арт-рынка Art Tactic. Окончив факультет бизнеса и имея опыт работы юрист-консультом, он занимал руководящие посты в крупнейших международных издательствах, среди которых Penguin Books. После получения магистерской степени в области арт-менеджмента он сосредоточил свое внимание на развитии художественного рынка, работал в галерее Тейт и Лондонском колледже искусств, а в 2004 году стал одним из основателей Art Insight Limited. Постоянный участник международных арт-конференций, член-основатель сообщества профессиональных консультантов по международному арт-рынку. Джеффри Boloten на Synergy Art Forum.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a nice lunch and you're ready to go again. I'm going to say my one Russian word again, as well, like everyone, Spasibo. Spasibo for having me, for welcoming in fantastic Moscow, and it's been a lovely time. And I also have to say, like my other speaker panelists, my Russian connection, we all have to tell you what our Russian connection is. My grandfather was born and raised in St. Petersburg. So part of me, I don't know, this part is Russian. So somewhere, and he taught me nothing. So you got me as I am. So what we're going to talk about today with my talk is a little bit different, I think, than the other talks, because we're going to talk about the future, much more than what's going on now, what's going on in the past. And I think that's what's very interesting. The online world in general, the internet has made huge transformations in many, many industries. If you look at music, it's completely transformed the whole business model of the music industry. If you look at books, the whole publishing industry has been changed, and all independent bookshops have gone out of business, and it's all online now. If you look at taxis, you know, the famous Uber has completely transformed that industry. Now, if you look at the art world, not so much. So it's a different way of looking at things. The art world is a very, very traditional world. The structure is very traditional, and it takes a lot to move it or shift it anywhere. And it takes it's been around since, you know, the 1300s or 1400s, and it's very, very entrenched. So in terms of the new world we're going to be looking at now, you have to think things have been moving quite slowly compared to other industries like luxury goods or books or music industry. But I want to tell you what the opportunities are and where things are going, and things are moving quite swiftly. And a lot is going online that used to be not online. It's also quite a controversial thing. The art market, the art world is really kind of not very comfortable with the idea of online because it takes away your interacting with art, which is a very important thing. But that's a big issue I'll discuss as well. So, and I also want to finish off towards the end talking about, is there a big transformation happening? Is there an Uber effect that's going to be happening in the art world that's going to completely change things? But I'll wait till the end to anticipate that happening. So just to move forward, this is the landscape of where we are in the art world, just to demonstrate really how important and how fundamental the whole online art buying and selling is at this point in time. There's a whole issue of the globalization of the art world. So the art world now spans the entire globe. And most dealers or gallerists or people selling art can't do that in a very effective way. If you have one gallery in Moscow or just have a small gallery in Madrid, there's no way you're going to be able to reach this global art world where there's all this new wealth and new opportunities. So in that sense, the online world is a huge opportunity for the art world to be reaching these global opportunities. Also, the other thing about the landscape is the auction and gallery models. I don't know how much anyone's spoken to you about it, but there's a big crisis now in Western gallery markets. A lot of galleries are closing. I think Moscow probably had that issue a while ago as well. Galleries are really struggling. There's high rents to pay in places like New York and London and big urban centers. They can't afford that anymore. Art fairs are becoming very, very expensive for galleries to operate in, and they're really struggling. And there's a big issue in terms of the crisis, in terms of galleries and dealers. They're also competing more and more with the auction houses. And the auction houses are very powerful, and they're global. And so for a small independent or small dealer or gallery to be competing is becoming more and more difficult. So once again, this is the landscape where we're looking at the online world. This is basically a pie chart showing what's happening right now in terms of how much dealers are selling online. As you can see, it's very little. You know, it's sort of, what is it now? It's so that we basically this survey that's done of all dealers and galleries around the world every year. So 4% online via their own website, 4% are selling via another website, which we'll talk about as well. So 6% altogether is how much dealers are selling of their stock through the online environments. In 2013, it was 5%, so it's not going like crazy fast, as you can see. It's been slow, and it's so that the way it's been working is quite labored, but it is actually moving quite swiftly. And even if it is going slow, there's still really fundamental important things about the online world, which is really benefiting the online environment as well. So once again, this report that's done, which the survey is, says that 2018, the global sales of art online, $5.4 billion. That's a lot of sales on an online environment, which is quite new. And that's a 10% increase from last year, and that's a 72% increase from 5 years ago. So as much as it's going slow, it's actually a huge increase in a very short space of time, and in terms of the online world. And if you remember nothing else from this talk, the most important thing about what online is providing is new customers, right? It's reaching new audiences and new customers. And that is a fundamental issue for galleries and dealers today, and a fundamental problem. So the online world is providing this incredible opportunity to be able to do that. And this is something that all our speakers have been talking about as well. So basically, this is a quote from this survey that was done. Online sales become an important method of reaching new customers. Over half, 56% of the online sales generated by dealers are made to new clients. So this is a whole new fantastic opportunity for dealers and galleries to reach a new audience. So that's just showing what the opportunity. This is a slightly complicated graph chart, but this is again from the same survey, and the survey asked dealers what their biggest challenges they see in the coming years. And it's very interesting to see what they see as the biggest threats and the biggest issues they're dealing with. And of these sort of top 10 or so, more than probably half are related or connected to the online world. So just to look at the first one, finding new clients. That was our #1 challenge, they're saying, is the thing. The online world itself offers an incredible opportunities to deal with that challenge. So, and if you move down the line again, the economy, participation at fairs, internet and online sales is sort of #4 in terms of their priorities, what their challenges are, and overheads for business premises. All these things are directly related to the flip side of art online sales and increasing the online sales. So it hits directly in terms of the dealers and galleries and their issues and their challenges to this opportunity for them, which is not insignificant. So what I'm going to talk about this afternoon is all these I'm going to talk purely about sort of buying and selling online, the commercial side of the online. I'm not going to talk about databases or all these other wonderful things, just the idea of the commerce that goes on the online environment. So we're going to look at auctions, art and social media sites, art sales, art market transformation, and the future. And there is a report, which I'll talk about in a second, called the Hiscox Art Tactic Report, which you can download free from the either Hiscox insurance site or our Tactic site, which is a survey of all online collectors and dealers, which really tells you a lot about what's going on, what the behavior is as well. So to begin with, auctions. I mean, the big players in the market generally are the two big auction houses, with the Sotheby's and Christie's, who control 90-something% of the global auction market. So what they do makes a big difference in terms of how they're adopting. The year 2000, they both started this new experiments of doing online auctions, and they both absolutely failed miserably. And they ran away so fast from the online environment, you couldn't even see them moving, how fast they ran from online. But yet, in the year 2014, Christie's invested $14
$20 million investment in, and there's a huge amount of energy now that's being put into the online auctions. Now, the difference between, for the auction houses, there is something called an online-only auction. So it's just an auction that's just online. But there's also an online component of bidding. So at a live auction, there are people who now are more and more bidding online rather than telephone or a paddle. So that's another component. But for our purposes, we really want to talk about actual buying and selling online. So the auction houses are both, the big ones, are putting on sales that are just online. There's no physical sale, just online. And they're having more and more success with these. So if you can see, the 84% increase at Christie's, at 20% increase at Sotheby's. But the big thing, and that's what I said in the beginning in terms of what they're getting out of these online sales, is new customers. So Sotheby's has estimated that 45% of their buyers last year online were new to them. And even more important, 20% of those new customers go on to actually bid at live auctions. And why that's important is because, well, I'll talk about it in a minute. The value of the art that's sold online is still quite modest. The things that are sold for millions and tens of millions and 100 millions are very much still sold in live auctions. These customers, even though they're not live now, will come new customers through the online environment and also through into the higher level stuff. So this is the big, big hope of the online world for them and building these things. The online-only sales are not so significant, as you can see. 1 to 2% of the big first-tier auctions like Christie's and Sotheby's and Phillips, Bonhams, only 1 to 2% are online-only sales. So it's not a lot. But for the smaller auction houses, makes a huge difference. Something like 14% of their average sales are from the online-only sales. So it's really the people who are really taking advantage and benefiting from online sales are the auction houses at the next level than the top ones, mostly because their price levels are not at that high price. And still, on the online environment, there's a price ceiling into what people are happy to be buying and selling. But once again, going back, as you saw, the new customers, 41% of these people online are new to the auction houses. This is a slide that was very interesting, just showing how fast. In the online environment, there's a real rush for players to come in. It's a new environment, okay? It's quite new for the art world, and it's almost been running in a sort of parallel universe to the regular art world. So it hasn't really been integrated very much into the traditional art world. And that's happening more and more, as you can see from the Sotheby's and Christie's activities, and also smaller ones. But more and more, there's people coming in, trying to set up and become the hub, trying to become the big online center, doing everything from data to news to auctions. And so there's been a lot of drive of people trying to build this incredible hub. I put this as an example. There's something called Auctionata, which was a very big online auction house that served also other things besides just art. They merged with something called Paddle 8, which is an online auction house, and the idea was that they were going to create this incredible hub. It didn't work out very well. It filed for bankruptcy the year after it merged, so the plan didn't really work out. But Paddle 8 has recommenced now with new funding and is really starting again. But it's just that what's interesting about the online world and the art world is much faster. Things are moving really quickly, whereas in the traditional art market, things don't move very quickly and progress isn't made that quickly. But in the online world, it creates incredible opportunities to take new markets, to take new territory, and to do it really quickly. So that's why I put this slide in terms of the pace of what's going on. There's also, what's very interesting on the auction side, there's things called auction aggregators. So yes, there are auction houses who are doing their, Christie's is doing their own online sales, Sotheby's is doing their own online sales, they're all doing their own. But then there's these companies who are actually putting their business model online, and then smaller players are using that platform for themselves. So not everyone can afford to develop a very expensive database to do online sales. So these companies like the Sale Room, BidSquare, and Valuable are actually providing the platform for a lot of smaller galleries and auction houses to use their platform to conduct online sales. That makes sense? It's kind of like an art fair. Like they provide the tent, everyone comes in and takes part of it, and they don't have to actually pay for the whole tent. They just pay for their portion of what they're doing. So it's a way for smaller players to take advantage of the online environment without having to develop their own online systems, which is incredibly important, expensive and labor intensive as well. So that's what's happening with auctions. The aggregators. And then there's a lot of people who, once again, who are looking to create these hubs. So ArtNet, I'm sure a lot of you who have ever dealt with the art world, ArtNet is the Bible of databases with all the art prices of all auctions. ArtNet and ArtPrice both, they're sort of the data sources. So they're very big and they're used a lot for the art industry constantly. So what they're trying to do as well is expand what they're doing, the traffic they have, and actually develop their own online sales as well, online auctions. So that's happening more and more. So I call them the hybrids because they're players who are not just doing online sales or online auctions, but they're doing many things, which is just adding to something to create, trying to create their hub in this sense as well. Art and social media. There was something called ArtStack. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, ArtStack, or how available these things are, which was set out to be kind of a social network for art. And there's something called the Google Art Project, which, like all things that Google does, is incredibly ambitious. And what they wanted to do, and still things have plans to do, is put every artwork that exists in every museum in the world onto the database. It hasn't worked so well so far, but they're still, Google keeps trying, and they'll probably at some point get to the end. But I think the most interesting thing, and we've heard that a lot this morning as well, about Instagram. And Instagram is really becoming a kind of hub for the art industry as well. It's the perfect partner, when you think of it, for art, for social media, for people talking to each other about art. You have a picture, you send it around, you post it on your Instagram site, and more the art trade, like galleries and dealers, are using Instagram, partly for their PR purposes, partly for their sales purposes. It's becoming a really important part of buying and selling online. So watch that space for Instagram and having more connections as well. This is a copy of this is ArtStack, which is an art social media site. Basically, you have a stack, so it's basically you put artworks that you like or you see in your stack, and then people follow you. It's kind of like Twitter in a way. You have followers who are looking at you. And there's some very influential people who are real trend setters in a way, like museum, gallery directors or art advisors who use that as a means of getting followers on these sites. Art sales, obviously the big one, and that's where, I've sort of put down where the bigger players are and where the sort of interesting activity is in terms of people who are buying and selling, their own goods, dealers, and also, you see in the bottom, galleries and artists themselves. Artists often have their own website where they sell work from their website, and galleries all very much have their own website where they can buy and sell as well. But other than that, there's a lot of these players who are setting themselves up as online stores. So basically, either they're selling works themselves that they have, or they're acting as a bridge to dealers and galleries who use the site as a selling technique. It's sort of like an aggregator as well. They're all very different, and they all have their own individual personalities and ways of doing things. ArtTuner, I'll talk about in a few minutes as well. The person who founded ArtTuner is part of a very long, big collecting family in Italy, and so they're very connected to it. And they do these curated sales. So they're actually mimicking the way the art world works. They have guest curators who come in and put a sale together, but it's all online. ArtSpace. Artsy is a very big one, another very, very big player in the online world. And they've been sort of surviving. You can tell that if an online art site is successful, if it survives longer than 5 minutes, or maybe a year, then you know it's doing very well. So Artsy has had a lot of funding from very big players in the art world. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a site that's sort of for people to buy art, but who aren't already involved in the art world. So new people, bringing new people in. So they've developed this algorithm, which basically it's kind of like Amazon, like people who like this book also will like that book. So they have a very simple way of discerning what you like and don't like. And they're putting a lot of energy into this algorithm in terms of developing how you are going to search the site in a very simple way. Saatchi Art deals with millions of unrepresented artists. First Dibs, Art Viatic. Art Viatic and the Spot List are very interesting, and they pose a big challenge to the art world as well, because they're collector-to-collector sites. So basically, you join the site, and you can buy and sell. Collectors can buy and sell to each other. So the person who gets knocked out of this transaction is the dealer. Do you think the dealer is happy about that? They're not happy about that. So it's sort of like a disintermediation. It kind of knocks out the middleman, which to some degree has some benefits. It has maybe cost-saving benefits. The dealer does take, often will take 50% of an artist's sale. The gallery takes and the artist gets 50%. If you cut the dealer out of it, everyone goes, yay, we get to keep 100%. But what you don't get is the expertise of the dealer and the gallerist, the connections that the dealer and gallerist has with institutions, with museums, with curators, and also the monitoring of an artist's career, which is very important. So yes, in some ways it's a very good thing. In some ways it's a dangerous thing, and it's shaking up the art world in some way. These are big players. You've heard about these sites, I presume. The interesting thing about both of these, they're both kind of making tiptoes into the art world. Amazon has a 200 million customer base, so you can imagine how, and Sotheby's actually had a joint venture with Amazon as well, and tried to develop sort of an ecosystem to do it. How that branding sort of matches is not really clear. eBay, 150 million active buyers. They sold $5.2 billion worth of art sales, but all the art sales they sold were 95% were under $100. So I don't know what art that is. There's not a lot, sort of posters, I think. But the fact is, which is, I think that's an important point, they're not really selling a lot of art. They're not threatening the art world. But they are connecting with a lot of people, and they are selling some form of art. Maybe it's a matter of time before they move up into the sort of, into the art world and start challenging the art world as well. But they're obviously big online players who have a lot to offer and to teach the art world as well. Big innovators, and I always like to talk about the people who are doing really interesting things, who are actually trying to shake up the art world and the online art world. So ArtTuner, as I said, what they're doing differently is they're doing these curated sales. So they're actually bringing in, they're sort of mirroring the way the art world works in a validation way. One of the problems in terms of the online art world is it's kind of like the Wild West, right? There's no one to tell you, what is right. No one you can trust who's validating. We heard a lot this morning, Ian's talk about the importance of validation in terms of building an artist's market and career. On the online world, the danger is, and the problem with pushing out sort of the dealers and galleries, you lose that validation. So anything could be happening. You don't know who to rely on and whose taste to be happening. So that's what, ArtTuner is sort of recreating the fact that there are people who are mediating. There are experts who are brought in to show you or to demonstrate what they think is quality or not quality. Rise Art is a firm that actually you can rent art and then buy it as well afterwards. Interesting new. And then the last two, and this is where a lot of the innovation is happening on the online side, is through the logistics, through shipping, through insurance, through all this sort of boring stuff that happens, but it's an incredible industry in the art world. It's billions of dollars. So a lot of things are happening in terms of online that are things like shipping and logistics aggregator. ArtRunner, basically, if you want to ship a piece of artwork from Bulgaria to California, and they will give you the options of what the different companies and what their charges are. So it's sort of like a TripAdvisory type things, but it's simplifying basically what the idea of a lot of the logistics, which are very difficult. And Articheck actually has digital conditioning reports, similar things. That's an ArtTuner sales. Now these two are very interesting, really new players, and they're very technically oriented. There's something called, anyone hands up use Smartify or Magnus? I don't know if it's available here or not. Yes, 2 people, yes. Okay, well, I'm going to show you a little bit of an example of what they do. But very interesting as well in terms of what they're doing. Smartify is less of a commercial site. What they're trying to do is basically hook in with museums and not really the commercial side of buying and selling art. So basically, it's all about this sort of Shazam Do people know what Shazam in the music side is? Woohoo, Shazam. So a lot of people are trying to replicate Shazam, but for the art world. As you can imagine, it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. Basically, the idea is to take a picture of the artwork you're interested in, and then it'll search its database and come up with information. And I'll show you the difference between these two sites. For Smartify, it's about sort of artist information. It's very historical, and it's very scholarly in that way. So if you're at a museum and you want to know more about a particular artwork, it'll tell you that. Whereas the next thing is this.
Hi, I'm Magnus, founder of the app Magnus. Have you ever been to a gallery opening? I bet you know what it feels like. Look at this guy. He wants to impress this girl, but he has no idea who the artist is. Now there is hope. Open the app, take a photo of the artwork, and the app tells you everything you need to know.
This is not a Picasso.
But look at this gentleman. Just because he looks rich doesn't mean he has to overpay, right? Now you can see all prices from galleries and from auctions at your fingertips. And we also tell you where to go next. With our map, you can find any gallery around you. And the best thing, you can download the app for free. So you can spend your money on other things, like me right now.
Wave goodbye, that's it. Now, Magnus has been quite a controversial thing. When it first started, they were taken off the Apple as app. It was an app, obviously, because there was some dispute about where they. As you can imagine, the idea of Magnus is you go into a gallery, you go anywhere you want, you point and shoot like Shazam at an artwork, and it'll tell you not just about the artwork, but about prices. This is the new thing. So it's going to tell you, how much the last auction sales were for that particular artist or that piece, and also often what that actual piece is worth. If it's not been to auction, it'll say what it's being sold for at the gallery. So as you can imagine, to get that sort of information is unbelievably difficult. And to update it constantly. So everything you point your phone at is going to get that information. It's an unbelievably huge task. If it gets it right, it's going to be the most amazing thing ever, because anyone can find out. And it's about transparency. As I don't know if we've talked about this the last few days, one of the big problems in the art world is lack of transparency. We don't see what's going on. What we do see is auction sales, and I think this is something Pearl talked about. We can see that because they're public records. So that's only half of the market. The other half, things like dealer sales and gallery sales, we have no idea what goes on there. They don't have to actually report their sales. It's an unregulated market. I'm going to go too far into that, but it really tells you about why this is so important. It's an unregulated market. Dealers don't have to tell anyone what they sell. No one knows what they sell. So half the market or even more is completely unknown. So the idea of anything that's going to give you transparency into the market, whether it's price or whether auction history, is an incredible thing, and that will transform the art market in some way as well. So Magnus, watch that space. At the moment, the big news is they got a very new funder putting money in, which is Leonardo DiCaprio. Yay. So he's going to lend a lot of support, funding, but also his profile. He's a very big collector of contemporary art. So that's going to be something big. If they can raise enough money to make it the huge amount of investment they need to make it work properly, it's going to be very interesting. So we shall see. Two other firms that are online, which are doing very innovative things, something called Sedition and something called Data Editions. And why I think that they're particularly interesting, because they're actually dealing with art that's new media art, that's digital art. So it's not just paintings or physical objects. They're actually taking things that are not physically oriented based and they're actually dealing with it with their sites. What Sedition does is they commission artists, like very big artists, like Tracy Emin, like Damien Hirst, and they do these big editions of video artworks, right? They do edition of 200 or 300, and they're very cheap. So they're like maybe £50 or £60 or $100 maximum. So you can actually buy a very big named artist's work for a very, and their new media work, then you get access to this work indefinitely, sort of thing. So that's why it's very interesting, because it's actually dealing with media types of art that are actually very new to the art market as well. Data Editions is very similar, and they're being funded by the Zabludovic family, who are big patrons based in the UK as well. And they're trying to commodify, collect, and distribute intangible art forms. So once again, they deal with the same things like video art, like new media, but also sound art. All these ways of art that are really difficult to buy and sell, that the art market itself hasn't been able to cope with. These sites are, because they're digital sites and they're online sites, they can actually hook in to the whole, the mindset of these works and really create new audiences. So that's why I think these are really interesting sites to watch, and more. So let's get to the prices on the online world. And I think that's very interesting, and it's still an issue. As much as you hear sometimes, ArtNet says we sold a work for 2.1 million online. I don't particularly believe these things, or maybe they were set up. But for the most part, we're looking at 97% of sales of online business are less than $50,000. So as you can see, there's a comparison on this graph between we don't have 2017 yet, but 2015, 2016. The prices that they are achieving in terms of the height of the prices is growing. They are, online sites are getting more, getting to higher price levels than they have, but it's very slow, and it's still very far beyond, below a lot of what the top dealers and galleries and auction houses are doing. So there still is a ceiling, a sort of psychological ceiling in terms of what the value of the work. But someone else said when I was doing this presentation a while ago, they said, well, 97% of anyone's sales are less than 50,000, so it's not like a big news. So, which is true. So the fact is, it's not that the online world, although it's not like the big auction houses or the big dealers, they're selling hundreds of millions worth of art, but it is very similar in price service now to your mid-level and small-level gallery. So it is actually making a lot of ground, and as you can see, it's year on year, the price levels are going up. Art online, what are the big issues and risks? Interesting things, these are some things I've sort of talked about. In terms of the benefits, transparency. This is something I talked about. The more things go online, the more we have prices available, we're all going to understand and know about it. There's no tricks people can play on you. It's all going to be very apparent, and that's a really good thing, a good benefit. Liquidity, and that is about sort of how often you can buy and sell at work. That's the other problem with the art market, is liquidity, lack of liquidity. So what happens is it's very difficult for you. It's not very difficult, but there's a lot of stumbling blocks between you buying and selling your work. There's a lot of issues which are not like in other industries or sectors where you can really quickly buy and sell work. In the art world, if you're looking at auctions, sometimes you have to wait 6 months for the next relevant auction to come up to put your work in. That's not always very handy for collectors maybe who need money very quickly or to raise money. So liquidity is a big issue. The online world is providing a huge benefit for that sake, because there's all these sites, there's lots and lots of ways that you can buy and sell work, not just through traditional ways, which are actually often very time-consuming and not conducive to your time and speed. So it's offering a lot of new sales outlets, which is a really good benefit for the online, for the art market in general. Global exposure is obvious. If you're a small gallery doing business in one city, you can reach the whole world online. So obviously that's going to be a huge benefit for you as well. And the last one, in terms of savings, is maybe the most important of all the benefits of it, in terms of the transaction costs and the overheads. So if you're looking at the auction world, if you go to Sotheby's or Christie's auction, the average commission that you'll be paying is about 25%, right, of whether you're buying or selling something. On the online auctions, it's much less. It's maybe 5%, 6%. So the transaction costs are lower online. That makes a big difference. But even so, when you're selling online, when I said at the beginning one of the biggest problems that the galleries are having are their overheads, are their rents in very expensive places like Hong Kong and London and New York, and also their art fairs that could cost £100,000 to get a stand at, and they have to do 10 of them a year, and also the drain and everything else. Online solves all these problems. The overheads, you don't have to have a shop, or you can have a small shop. You don't have to go to the art fairs. So there's a lot of benefits on the online world might offer in terms of alleviating a lot of these really big problems that galleries are having now. But that's not to say there aren't risks. And there's always a flip side to all great things that come up in the world. Authenticity. There's a really worry. The World Wide Web is a very big and crazy thing. How do you know what's being sold is authentic, it's right, who it is, what's happening? It just opens up a lot of room for maybe more issues in terms of authenticity and fakes and forgeries and things like that. But that's very interesting too, and what the response to that is usually, well, online, people react in the same way as they're buying art anywhere. They will rely on who it is that's selling. So go to a reliable sellers, go to Gagosian Gallery, go to the auction houses' websites. You can rely on that. It's like anything else. If you're gonna, if you see something and you don't recognize who's selling it, there's going to be more risks available. Quality and condition, much harder to see online than if you're standing in front of the picture, right? Maybe you don't see that slice of the picture that you can't see that's lighted properly, so you can't actually spot it. So that's another sort of risk you're taking in a way. Speculation, invisibility, there's more people, there's more probably room for speculation, which may be or maybe not be. And lack of expert guidance, and that's what I was talking about, it kind of pushes out the people who are the gatekeepers and who are the ones who actually are kind of guiding the artist and kind of guiding the collector in this process. So anything that cuts them out, yes, it's good in some way because maybe you save some money, but you're missing some of their expertise. And online, that's one of the worries. But I do think, as we can see some of these other places, they're actually building that into the online site now in that way. Some of the big issues, I say replicate versus innovate. What's happened now, and I think this is stage one of art online, is what the people who are doing online businesses, buying and selling, are kind of replicating exactly what happens in the physical world, but online. So auctions, there's physical ones, and then the online ones. They had art fairs that were physical, and then online art fairs. And there's sales sites online. So it's kind of like just doing the same thing physically, but online. The innovation is going to come, I think, when they start doing different things. When they start moving the models around a bit more and actually shaking things up. And I think that's stage two. The other thing is, and this is a trend that is happening, virtual versus physical. And I'll show you in terms of the feedback that from the collector surveys. One of the big problems that collectors have, or people buying art, is they can't see the art. Something like 82% of the people who respond to the survey say their biggest problem with buying art online is not being able to actually see it. And as you know, standing in front of an artwork is a hugely different thing than seeing something on a little JPEG or online. So that's an issue. So what's been happening now, this is sort of stage two of what's going on in the art world, there's a lot of physical stuff being added to the online environment. So people like Saffron Art, which is an Indian online website only, are now doing physical viewings and physical sales. Art Tuner, which I said, as I talked about before, which is an online site, are actually now doing also gallery shows where you can see the art. So these people are, and Saatchi Art is also hooked up with something called the Other Art Fair, which is a physical manifestation of the same thing. So what's happening more and more is people are realizing that the physical part of the art world is important to many people and is important to the art world. So they're combining the online with a physical experience as well. And I think that's going to be an ongoing trend of not just cutting out everything physical. Moving swiftly along, speed 3 more minutes, the state of the market. This is a report I said that's done. You can download it for free. It's done. They survey all the online buyers and galleries. This is the cover. nothing major in terms of what they found, but younger and first-time buyers are really drawn to online. Less intimidating buying online, in your pajamas at home than going into a gallery where people are mean to you. I know people go to galleries, sometimes they feel a bit intimidated. Instagram has overtaken Facebook as a means of connecting. And also, as I said, not seeing the artwork is seen as by 82% of the respondents as the biggest hurdle problem they have with buying online. But I think we're going to start seeing how that's going to be plugged in. We're going to end on this, and I think this is a very interesting point, because a lot of times when I do a talk on the online world, people say, okay, where's Uber coming? When is the disruptor coming and shake up the whole art world and really recreate, which has happened in many other industries. So a lot of people have looked at this issue, and the idea of this is how a disruptive innovator has been defined, and this is the guy who sort of the Uber effect has been defined. So change begins at the lowest resource, overlook bottom of the thing. The problem with the art world, and people are looking at, can the art world be disrupted in the same way as something like Uber? And the answer is probably not, because there isn't that lower level mass sort of sector that exists. There isn't this sort of mass market on the bottom of the art market that can be shaken up. It's not structured the same way as other industries are structured. Also, there's other issues like barriers to entry. It's very difficult. You can't just sort of move in like Uber did and just take over. To get in and to establish yourself in the art world, there's many, many, many hurdles, of centuries worth of hurdles to get through. So it's not the same thing. But that's not to be said that it might not happen, and that probably won't happen. I'm sure there are people who are going to be doing a lot of issues. The problems that people have had in the past is that the people who come into the art world very new, and usually tech people who don't have any art knowledge or art background or art business, and they go, I've got a great idea, we're going to do this. And on paper, it's a fantastic idea, but it doesn't match with the ways that the art world operates. And the art world is very strong, and the way it operates is very strong and very difficult to move. So what it's going to take is someone who has knowledge of how the art world itself operates, which is not the easiest thing to figure out, and also the tech knowledge. It's going to have to marry those two things and not just be an amazing technical issue. So the last quote is basically from Mark Glimcher, who is head of Pace Gallery, which is a big, big international gallery. He said, the true disruption was not going to come from an entrepreneur, it's going to come from the artist. So all those artists amongst you, you are the disruptors. You are going to go out and change the world. But I think that he's got a very good point. I think it's going to have to come from inside the art world, and people who understand and know the inside of the art world, rather than a tech sort of expert who's going to impose something that doesn't fit the way it operates, if that makes sense. So in terms of the future, based on the trajectory of where we see in the art world, everyone's predicting there's going to be a huge growth, and there will be as it goes on. So, by 2020, the online art was going to be worth $9.5 billion and keep going. So I think we're at the beginning, to conclude, I think we're at the beginning of stage one of the art online. It is now becoming more and more part of the art world rather than separate and as distinct. And I think people are realizing what the benefits and what the great things that the online world can offer. And especially, people are getting more and more used to it. The millennials, especially, and the Generation Z, they have no problems with operating online. It's only me and my crusty friends who have an issue with it. So I think as you see the generation changes too, it's going to make a big difference to the online art world. And this could be where the opportunities for the future are. So you all go out there and get online and sell some art. Thank you very, very much.